Hi, I'm Ray Johnston, and in this brand new podcast series from Accenture, I've been lucky enough to talk to Australian CEOs who share their take on our nation's recovery. From Dr. Larry Marshall, CEO of Cyro, to Anna Bligh, CEO of Australian Banking Association. I've had access to the sharpest minds at the heart of leadership during a time like no other. If you're into innovation, business, human behaviour, sustainability, and enjoy speculating about the future, you're going to love this.
Here and beyond.
Accelerating Australian business.
In this episode, I'm joined by Tara Brady, Accenture's market unit lead across Australia and New Zealand. Originally from London, Tara moved to Sydney last year, bringing 25 years of experience transforming organisations in the UK and Europe. In Australia, Tara now represents Accenture on the Business Council of Australia, the Australian British Chamber of Commerce, and is the executive sponsor of the local Skills to Succeed program, which helps disadvantaged young people build skills and confidence. Prior to his time at Accenture, Tara was CEO of Southend United Football Club and served 5 years in the Royal Navy. And when Tara's not in his day job, he can be found training with the next generation of fighters in Redfern's boxing rings. Welcome, Tara. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, Ray. It's good to see you.
No worries. Good to see you again. So you haven't been in the country for very long.
No.
Which means you arrived during the pandemic. What was that like?
Well, it was an experience. So I came in August, and I left a country that was really challenged with the whole COVID, the lockdown, and culturally challenged with the lockdown as well, because the disciplines just weren't there that you've had over here. So first of all, leaving there and arriving here was almost a culture shock in some ways. Then I had to get through the quarantine, which was an experience. And I was coached by people over here so I can get up to speed with the Australian culture as quick as possible. One was to read The Lucky Country by Donald Horne.
Yes.
One was to watch The Rake, which is the Rake series, and one was to watch The Australian Dream, which, regardless of your views, but it was still at least understand the topics. So I suppose The Rake took up most of my time because it's 5 series, and I had a lot of time to kill in the quarantine. And it probably was the most enjoyable. I did enjoy it.
So you got a crash course education on Australia
through
just
Richard
watching
Roxburgh,
TV.
Yeah. Oh, I found him great.
So you've noticed differences in the way the pandemic has impacted the two countries. But what about in business? How do we do things differently here?
Well, I've been pleasantly surprised. So the UK does seem, and I've only been in the UK. So obviously I've worked globally. I've worked in the US. I've worked in other parts of Europe, but I've always been based in the UK and predominantly financial services. So there's a way that obviously UK do things compared to different for the rest of the world, but there's clearly a way Australian people do things differently in their business community. One of the things that I've noticed here is just the community is much better. It's easier to network, engage, accommodating, transparent. It's a nicer feel. How do we do things differently? Because of the need, and we'll come on to that in a second, but there's more of a burning platform for change in the UK, particularly with the economic crisis in the last 10 years from banks, the retrenchment of financial services, European banks going back to Europe, US banks under the Trump era going back to the US. We've had to change. We had to do some dramatic changes. You see a lot of fintechs coming into the UK. So there's been a huge need for transformation. Coming to Australia, there isn't that tough environment that we are a wealthy country. We benefit from great raw materials in the ground that are sustainable for a long time. So we have those benefits to be more, sit back and make decisions about what we're going to do. We're not always the earliest adopters. We're not always the first to create and be innovative, but it is much more open about change and the discussions around it. So it's different. I would say for myself personally, I find the challenge is unique in so much that I'm dealing with organisations that are fairly healthy compared to organisations that are really struggling in the UK. And with healthy organizations, it's more about strategic thinking, how you can grow your platform rather than dealing with the firefighting of here and now. So it's been an experience.
So Tara, do you think that as our natural resources run out in the future, they're a finite resource, that we might become a little bit more bold in the way that we approach business?
I'm not sure if it's bold, and the finite resources, that's a long way still before they become finite. So that's part of the challenge. It's changing now. I think we should be more around why we need to be more today, regardless of the natural resources. I think natural resources are great wealth to build off, to invest in thinking and ideas and creativity and back up some of our innovation. So I'm more about what can we do today with the resources, the natural resources and the wealth that we've got. And at the moment, I feel we're very dependent on imports, particularly in core areas such as pharmaceuticals. Look at now with the vaccine. I'd love to see us more advanced in not just medicine, but technology as well. So we are the leader in some of these fields. So the rest of the world are buying from us. And if we look at something as simple as the natural resources, there's still something bizarre in my mind that we send the nickel and the lithium around the world and it comes back and we're buying electric cars like Tesla. There's something bizarre about that. We're one of the few countries in the world that has all the resources and the wealth and the know-how to actually execute it ourselves. We just need the investment and will and motivation to build these things, and we could be the leader in these areas. So it's just a great opportunity for the country.
Yeah, we are seeing these manufacturing plants just sitting there empty. We're seeing skilled workers ready to jump in.
We've got all the resources, we've got all the skills, we've got all the investment. It's just such an untapped opportunity. I know, coming from a country that doesn't have that, it's challenged, really struggling at the moment. It's exciting times.
What do you think needs to change to make that happen?
Well, you mentioned the bold. I do think, but I think there's it's a collective backing from not just business leaders, but from the government, from the people. We still only have leadership in corporate, particularly, only pulls from the degree educated group of people, which is, I think, less than 25% of the country. That's 75% of untapped talent that we don't even go after. And it's not just widening the net to bring those talent in and explore, but it's also educating, making it accessible for technology for those people to want to come in. And it's a much bigger challenge. So it's about having the motivation. It's about having the collective community, the sort of broader ecosystem, so business and politics, and then the talent to back it up. And we've got it all. It's for us to do. And the reason I keep harping on about other countries, because they haven't got it all. So they are scrapping a bit to find solutions. Talent probably would be the one I'd say is the one right here and now that we need to step up on. And if I may do quote an analogy, if you've watched the film or program, the TV series Star Trek,
yes,
in it, James Kirk and all officers have to pass something called the Kobayashi Maru. And the Kobayashi Maru is effectively a simulation where you can't win. So you're in the seat, in your captain's seat, and the enemy are coming towards you. You can either fight them and you'll lose a ship, or you concede and then you're into the hands of the enemy. And so it's how you deal with the situation. It's a no-win, but on the flip side, they're monitoring how you manage it. Captain James T. Kirk can't deal with no-win situations. So the night before, he cheats and changes the code on the software. So he then wins the game because the game has been cheated. Now, where am I going with this? The point was he went out of the game that was in front of him. He stepped out of the game and made his game bigger. He was saying, actually, the game is just to win, not to win within the narrow rules of what's put in front of me. And if you think of particularly where I've come from growing up, and I hear others over here who've gone through tough economic backgrounds and working class, they don't have those opportunities in front of you. And if they just play the straight games, if they work hard, sometimes they still don't get the opportunities. It is unfair. So they do have to do more. So what we need to do is give them those broader opportunities so they can excel. They can hustle a bit. They can break little rules, push boundaries. And it's those people that break through, you'll see some real talent. It's those that we want to attract. And how do we get them?
I love that analogy. Tell me about your reflections on the Google Digital Economy Report. What did that include?
And without coming across as the know-it-all Pom, and I really am not. But when I look where we sit in the world in some of the league tables, and if you look at the Economic Complexity League, we're, I think, 87th behind El Salvador and Kazakhstan. if you look at the recent Accenture strategy data that was done on technology take-up and digital, I think we were 35 out of 36 OECD countries for take-up. We were 50% behind on cloud adoption, just to the average of the OECD. I mean, if our technology take was the average of OECD countries, I think the productivity was in double digits about where we are today. So there's huge opportunities in front of us. Now, I'm not pointing out those facts to say we're bottom of the league table, how bad are we? It was more about look at the opportunity in front of us. Imagine in a wealthy country, with all this in front of us, with this opportunity, what could we really be? We could be a great power.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already seen throughout history, we are early adopters of technology in this country. So to up that acceleration would just make sense, right?
We're early adopters because we have the wealth to buy it. We are the first to market effectively. But
we're just like new gadgets, really.
It's new, let's have it. So, but wouldn't it be great if we actually were inventing it ourselves and executing on some of our ideas and thinking, and the investment truly was behind it, not just government, but from the business leadership. It backed up some of the things that we believed in. It would be great.
How can we be using more digital technology to drive growth, and how will that help us compete in a global market?
I think digital, when I look at something like simple as financial services, digital immediately brings efficiencies, fit for purpose, reducing of cost base, and speed to market, which is fantastic. But it also brings much more data, management, data analytics, to understand what your customer experiences are, supply chain improvement. So it isn't just about efficiency and cutting costs. It's also about revenue growth, new products to market can go quicker. It's really a whole step jump in operation. And I've seen, and I've spoken to a lot of the CEOs over here, we are, if I'm going back to the OECD, we are behind in some of the areas, but the path is easy to follow. There's many people in the world who have already done this. So the catch up I don't see taking long, but I do feel it should be starting now. And so if some of the CEOs I'm talking to, it's not around so much ambition, it's about the ability for them to execute on what they believe is right. So it's them putting investment behind it, them having their shareholders backing up, having the talent within the organisation to be able to support what they're trying to achieve. And that talent's got to be educated, that talent's got to come from pools that we're not necessarily looked at in the past. So it's a real coming together of how we can achieve greatness for our country. And I say our, as in I've now been adopted as an
We've adopted you.
Well, that's a fair point. I'd like to think I've been adopted.
I think it's fair to say that you have.
Thank you.
It's difficult to talk about, uptake of digital technology without addressing the fact that we do have a significant digital divide in this country.
Yeah.
Between people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, depending on where people are living, whether or not they have access to the internet or devices. How can we address the digital divide to support more inclusion and diversity? And
I think it's more than just digital. I think we're narrow and just focused on digital. I think it's technology. I think it's education. It really is the broadest mix. And so how can we educate, bring more talent into the workplace? When we look at just the basic stats of people who've got a degree in this country, it's only a quarter of the country today has got a degree.
I don't have a degree. Do you have a degree?
And I don't have a degree
There we go. So, 2 people without degrees.
Let's high five for that. So when you look at the business leaders, particularly corporate, are looking at a pool of 25%. They're not looking at the other 75%. Clearly, there's talent in that other 75%. How do we go and capture that talent? And it's difficult. I saw, we mentioned earlier on around what the UK are looking to propose for doctors and medicine in the UK, no longer needing a degree, move to an apprenticeship type version, which would immediately broaden the net for people who can join. And I don't want to quote, he's one of my favourite writers, but George Bernard Shaw, The Conspiracies of Laity. They're even talking about dropping Latin from the language because Latin benefits people who've got a more private education, have learned Latin at school. It's struggling with the vocabulary of your own country, then having to learn different language, it's very difficult. So there's the fact they're thinking about that, which is great, because all we have to do is just dip into the talent pool that clearly there's talent there, but we've ignored in the past.
Yeah, and we haven't embraced the different ways that people learn.
Yes.
Being a doctor, for example, I'm not a doctor. I don't want to speak on behalf of doctors, but it is such a hands-on role and it's such a customer-facing role. So to have that, to learn how to be able to do that in an apprenticeship setting makes so much sense.
When you first read it, you think, oh, hold on a second. People are not going to be educated to operate on me. But realistically, as long as they are educated and to the level required for the role, does it matter where they come from? Does it matter how their route to achievement? So it's those type of things I think we should focus on. But talent is particularly for Australia, for a number of reasons, will be a big challenge going forward.
So what are the characteristics of good leaders, especially in what we're going to call challenging times?
Yeah, there's a number of attributes and characteristics of good leaders, and I'm sure we've all read the books. And if there's three that I would stand out as key attributes for a leader, one is empowerment. You need to, one of the things I always say about a good leader is it's a person where people follow. So it's not having the badge or having the status or the title. People just follow you because you're leading by example and you're empowering others to go with the flow. And I'm a big fan of empowering others. The second one is accountability. Own your decisions, own your actions. And when I think of when I first joined the Royal Navy at 16, I was in the Navy for 5 years. The GI said to me, there's three key principles of leadership. And he said, don't blame others. Don't be a victim and don't be offended. Now, I know it's in the context of just being on a parade ground, and I know that's sensitive in some areas, but it gave me a sense of resilience. And also, he led by example. He'd just come back from the Falklands, and I just always remember thinking, he never uses excuses, and I really like that. And every time he made a decision, even if he got it wrong, he stood by it, and I was impressed. And actually very quick to make a decision again on the back of a wrong decision just to get the right decision. So, and then the final one is empathy. Probably my weakest one, actually, because we do need to move into a modern, more diverse, to bring in other views and strengths. And I've got a simple vantage point from my background, and I struggle at times to understand where people are coming from, and it's really important. So we've got to learn not just to talk and be open and share, but have empathy to understand what their vantage point is and the challenges they've got.
And it's a process as well, isn't it? And it's recognising, where your weaknesses lie as a leader, and to know that you're not always going to be perfect in those three elements, but it's something that you can continuously be working on. Yeah,
and I think we all, when I say empathy as a leader, I think we all should be more empathetic amongst each other. I think it's something that we should work on. I'm openly saying it's a weakness for me. So it's not just the modern day leader, it's the people who are following as well. It's for everyone.
And I'm sure it's different for everyone as well, because those qualities that you need to have, they need to feel authentic too, don't they?
I think we mentioned this before, Ray. Another George Bernard Shaw statement. It was, if you think in My Fair Lady, the play that he wrote and it turned into a film, it was about a flower girl who was poor, and it was about a lady who was wealthy. And his statement was the difference between a flower girl and a lady wasn't how they behave, it was how they was treated.
Ah.
And I just thought all the way through, it is true, because we do treat people differently based on how they behave and how they are. Now, if we've just gone through the recognising that people are different, then you've got to adopt. You've got to change with it. And so, by creating different levels for different people, is not necessarily the right thing. Everyone should have a certain principles of trust, integrity, should be resourceful, should have a thirst for knowledge. These things are important. And if they don't have that, then it's more about the person rather than about the background where they're from, which is. We're getting into a deep subject here, right? in terms of talent. But I'm really passionate. And I found when I come out of school with no education, I'm at 16, and the Navy, if anything, saved me because I had nowhere to go. It was a structure and a discipline I needed, and it was a learning I gained from it. And coming out of it, I felt strong enough to take on the world. And if I hadn't have had that, I don't know where I would have been. And just basic things. We mentioned this before as well, about basic things like vocabulary. I really struggled because I didn't have the solid education that others had. So it's quite exhausting at the end of the day. I'd be tired just understanding people's words. So, I think they're all important for great leadership.
Something else that you're passionate about is sport.
Yes.
So I do want to talk to you about sport. I'm curious, what can business leaders learn from sport? They feel very different from each other.
I don't know if you know, and I'm not trying to plug it because it's 20 years old. I wrote a book called Rules of the Game with my dad. I plug it. It's probably sold out now, but it was looking at business compared to war, politics and sport. And each is different. I don't think there are certain leadership principles that are across all of them. I mean, trust is a massive one. Leading by example is different in sport than maybe it is in business. It's all learning from each other. It's very hard to compare like for like, but they've all got basic principles. And then there's politics and there's war. And I read, and it's been quoted many times recently, that over here, business leaders are seen as more trusted and respected than politicians. There's a lot that we can all learn from each other.
Absolutely. So one final question for you, Tara. You are here on Here and Beyond. I'd like to know what your beyond looks like.
Well, if I'm talking for Australia and the business community, I think we should recognise where we are today. And it's been some great achievements, particularly with COVID, what's in front of us. We're a wealthy nation, which is fantastic. We're a healthy nation. It's great to be living here and it's really enjoyable. But we do need to start thinking about excelling in certain industries. We do need to back up our creativity with some investment. It's more than just having the ideas. It's executing on those ideas with strong investment from all of our ecosystem, not just businesses, but government as well. And we must step up our digital footprint. If you look at most of the organisations, I still feel we're behind. Most of the industries we're behind. And going back to the OECD, Accenture data that was done recently, even if we were 50% OECD, so we're average, we would be upping our productivity by 11%, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, wow.
So we've really got to step up. And so it's investment twofold. It's investment both in the ideas, but it's in the execution of talent and digital to back it up.
And what about from a personal perspective?
Well, from a personal perspective, I suppose two things that come to mind. One is I'm hoping it's going to stop raining. I've been here 6 months and all I've had is it's a great place, sun and sea, and I've just seen a lot of rain. But once the rain's cleared and the borders are open, I hope to spend more time looking around the rest of Australia, which just sounds lovely, and I'm excited by seeing all the beauty of Australia.
Well, hopefully you get to travel very soon. Thanks for joining me, Tara.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you for inviting me.
Don't miss the next episode of Here and Beyond, where I'll be joined by more prominent leaders to hear their take on the future of Australian business.
Here and Beyond.
Accelerating Australian business.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of Here and Beyond. And if you never want to miss any of our future episodes, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and a review. We'd love to hear from you.